Welcome, everyone. Looking forward to having a great chat today with Virginia Franco. We love to talk about resumes and everything related to resumes and all the questions that people have. I think, for me, one of the biggest challenges, because I get this all the time when I'm working with other people, is how long should the resume be and all that. And what I wonder about, first of all, Virginia, why don't you, introduce yourself a little bit because I know you pretty well, but I want to
Yeah.
make sure that everyone kind of knows a lot more about you.
So as I posted today when I was advertising about this talk, my name is Virginia Franco. I have been writing resumes since the dawn of day. When I got out of college back last century, I didn't know anyone wrote them for a living, and so I used my degree in journalism to write for companies and magazines and newspapers and a little bit of everything. And then in 2008, I sort of made it my living, making a career pivot like so many are doing right now. The recession had happened, and my family had taken a big hit, and I needed to figure out how to bring money in without drowning in childcare. I have four kids; they were very young. Three were still in preschool, and it was going to be a pretty hefty childcare bill. And so I started my own business. This is what we've seen a lot of in the last couple of years.
And I think one of the questions that comes up again and again is a lot of people are trying to figure out from a resume standpoint, how can they position themselves in that way? And I think one question I get all the time, and I'd love to get your thoughts about it, is how long should the resume be?
Yeah, so that's a very common question, and to me, there really shouldn't be any hard, fast rules. But that being said, there's some general guidelines. I aim if you are a new grad to 5 years of experience, or you've maybe been in the same role essentially for the big majority of your career, maybe did it with different companies, then I have it's not a huge challenge to fit it into a one pager. After that, I am comfortable going into 2 pages, and I think you should. I I read, I don't remember where the study was, but I remember reading a study that said they pulled a bunch of recruiters and decision makers, and they said, what do you prefer? And a huge amount said, well, we prefer one page. But then when you went back and looked at the percentage of people they hired, the stats actually showed that while they prefer one, they're hiring based off of two. And I think that's telling because it takes a lot to, you need that extra page to tell the story. I will go on to 3 pages after I have done a couple things. One, I have worked to synopsize previous experience that goes back further than 15 years. Um, I've I've picked and chosen, is that the word chosen, the earlier stuff that's relevant, synopsize it so it doesn't take up a lot of real estate. I have gone and really tightened up my language and removed filler stuff. I've made sure that the bullets that I have chosen really align with the job target. If I've done all those things and sort of made my margins to point 0.5, chosen a font that's 10 or 11, played with some of the word spacing and things like that, then I will go on to 3 pages. But probably 95% of the time, I do keep them to 2 pages, just because I know we're dealing with skim readers that are in a rush and they're looking at lots of them. And so I don't want to run the risk of losing that person who has maybe a shorter attention span where 3 or 4 pages is tough.
Hmm.
The other place where I will include a third page is if you are in a role where maybe you want to list some presentations, you've done some papers you've authored, that sort of things. Or maybe you're a mergers and acquisition person and you need to sort of do a deal sheet where it's sort of like an addendum page.
Hmm.
And so sometimes that calls for a third page, and I'm okay with doing that.
What I'd be curious to get is some questions. If people have questions from the audience, I would love for them to chime in. I'm just checking the chat now. Some old and familiar faces
It's
here.
like you got people from everywhere.
Yeah, I see. Well, I have some of my Jersey tribe, Merrill Cass coming in, and Carol coming from New Jersey, Scott Dell from Carolina. Um,
Yep, I love Florence, South Carolina. I used to pass by it all the time before they built the Myrtle Beach bypass.
traffic is everywhere. Um, I think for me, because I'm actually working with different people on resumes right now. So let me actually get to Joey. Um,
Really?
I know references are not included in resumes. And as a caveat, if you put down on the bottom references available upon request. You are so dating yourself and you don't want to do that. But what about including them in a cover letter that you might attach?
So for me, the power of a reference comes when you've gotten a little bit farther down the road and then they're asking for them. But where I have seen the feedback from a reference make an impact is if they have maybe included a recommendation in LinkedIn, or they've written a letter of recommendation. I will pull quotes from that information, and I don't mind putting them in a cover letter and sort of stating that this person was the CEO of, I don't know, Pepsi Cola or whatever, and sort of name drop their title and their company name where it's relevant. So you're sort of picking and choosing the highlights that align with your job target. So to me, that's more powerful than listing the references in a cover letter.
So I know one question that people ask me all the time is, what are the things that on a resume that should be excluded from the resume? Because so many people have a resume now and it's kind of dated in terms of what's there. You can kind of tell from far away exactly what's going on. So, I mean, what are some of the things you'd like to see not included, or things that kind of are like
Yeah.
warning?
Well, the things that you want to make to keep yourself fresh are there's a couple things, but the reasoning behind it is, in my view, especially when you're dealing with people that are my age, old Gen Xers, older baby boomers, or younger baby boomers, and maybe even some older millennials. One of the biases against people in our generation is that we are slow to change, and an easy way you can overcome that is by having a fresh and modern resume. So I feel like people are getting the memo, which is good. I don't see a lot of people listing two phone numbers, like a cell and a telephone anymore. Thank the Lord. People they should include this versus excluding, but make sure to include your LinkedIn URL in your resume. That shows that you embrace tech. Again, positions you as fresh and modern. There's no need to include your full address. City, state, and zip code allows people to search based on your area without giving away any security information for the reader to see, but also it positions you as fresh and current. Stuff that's really old, you don't need to list every single career moment you've had since the day you earned a diploma. Pick and choose the stuff that happened before 2000, and we're like 2007, 2008 right now, which is the last 15 years. Put it under an earlier experience section, and then I'll remove the dates from it for the human reader to see. I might put them in, if they're super relevant, I'll write them in and I'll put them in white font. That way, if someone is uploading them to ATS, I want to just make sure that it gets counted as experience. But the human eye doesn't need to see that. And that way, what I like about that approach is that of including an earlier experience section is that if you scooped ice cream at Baskin Robbins in 1992, it's not relevant. If you had a gap because you took care of kids back in 2004, it's not relevant. And again, you focus on the highlights from that role that are relevant to whatever it is you're targeting.
So these are a couple of related questions, including cover letters. Do recruiters read them? And then there's another question: should you include a cover letter every time you apply for a job? So I know they're kind of similar, and they talk about cover.
No, good question. Look, recruiters are just like everyone else. Everyone has opinions. Everything I have read and followed is that some read them, some don't, some absolutely love them, some absolutely hate them. So you're never gonna make everyone happy. But what I'll say is if it's asked for one, you should have it. If you're making a big pivot, or there's an elephant in the room that if the reader is just looking at the resume, they go, well, it sort of raises eyebrows, then the cover letter is a powerful tool to fill in those blanks. To me, I think a lot of people don't read cover letters because half the time they're not written very well. So if you write a really powerful cover letter, it can make a difference. There's sort of no downside to it except for your blood, sweat, and tears. Nobody's going to ding you for having it. But if you really, really hate them and you are maybe bypassing applying online as your first point of entry and you're getting your resume in front of people through networking and outreach, then you might not need a cover letter. So I guess it depends. Does that answer the question?
It does. I think And Marty wanted to know more about the white type, but
Um,
where it
so
works.
yeah, and I've done this for years. So let's say you had a job in 2000, from 2002 to 2006. That's pre 15 years. I will sort of say, I don't know, VP of accounting, PepsiCo, a brief line saying something like a cemented skill, something that's relevant to the job target. And then with the dates, I will put the dates and I'll hide them in white font.
Really? I,
Yeah.
I'd never thought about that before,
Yeah,
actually.
I don't, I am not 100% sure that that's necessary anymore, given, ATS are so much more effective and real people are behind the scenes reading them. But it just makes sure that if there is a number of years requirement, it gets counted because the ATS can see it.
One,
But what happens to all of us when we see stuff that's much older than 15 years ago, age discrimination aside, we tend to go into a rabbit hole. And in the rabbit hole, you will say, well, gosh, I wonder how many kids they have. I wonder if they went to school with this person. Like your brain goes to other places. And when you just have 10, 15 seconds to make an impression, I don't want 15 seconds or 3 seconds in the rabbit hole. And in my experience, that earlier section minimizes the rabbit hole. So putting dates to it increases your chance that you're going to dive into it.
I know one of the challenges that I have, first of all, great information. I know one of
Mm-hmm.
the, because I just did a couple of presentations um, for women who've been out of the work for a while, out of work, and we had a different conversation and different levels of LinkedIn. And what I ended up saying, taking myself off script, let's list the things you've done the last few years. Forget about the working part. What are the
Mm-hmm.
skills that you have, whether it's project management, overseeing stuff at home, or whether it's getting involved with a school
Volunteer.
PTO
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
volunteer, and think about positioning that as part of what you do. And I think, especially between COVID and everything else, people are very either they need to represent themselves, in
Yeah.
that way.
That's right. No, and I took several years off during the drowning diapers period of my life, but I was certainly not idle. I was writing newsletters for preschool and helping a friend with fundraiser, and I was doing stuff unpaid, tons of unpaid work. But you better believe I put that in my resume to show that was keeping my skills current.
What I actually suggested someone do is you have different types of experience. You have professional and maybe other related experience or other things. And that brings me to the whole idea of a functional resume versus chronological resume, and maybe a hybrid. I mean, do you have any thoughts or suggestions about the different types of resumes?
Yeah, I mean, it so depends on, again, what the target is, but um, truly functional resumes a truly functional resume is when you list a bunch of highlights related to your sales skills and a bunch of highlights related to your customer relations, and then you go and list your jobs. That is hard for people to follow. People like to read things linearly, and ATS doesn't always give you credit for those achievements because it doesn't know when they happened, if that makes sense. Um, I have been known, I was just talking to someone about this on LinkedIn Messenger today. I have on occasion used a hybrid chronological or functional chronological hybrid resume for situations where maybe some of the experience that relates to your target happened a while back. It's not current. And so what I'll do is I'll group your experiences into skill sets. So I'll say sales experience, customer service experience, and then I'll put the older stuff at the top, um, so that's what the reader sees on page one. That way you're not sort of burying the lead.
I actually did something very similar for someone I knew who's looking to go back into an industry, hadn't been in for a while, but I wanted to
Mhm.
make sure he listed some of his accomplishments as they were related to a skill instead of as
That's
a
right.
job.
And then what you do is if you want to get back into an industry, you in your branding at the top, you reference the industry and the company. Maybe you name drop the companies that you work for that related to whatever you're targeting in the branding at page one. That way it's front and center for the reader.
And I think also that's definitely where the LinkedIn profile comes into play for sure, because you
That's
can
right.
market
That's
yourself.
right.
So
Yeah, no, the themes in the resume and the LinkedIn are really similar. It's just that the tone is really different in terms of how you write it.
what I do find is challenging is job seekers have a difficult time marketing themselves, whether it's on LinkedIn or on a resume. because they make certain
Yeah.
assumptions or whatever it is. So
It's so hard to tell your own story. I didn't write my own resume. I got help with my LinkedIn. When you're so close to your own blood, sweat, and tears, it's a tall order to me.
I think one of the things that when, like, if I were to tell you what I did in an IT techie way, you would be rolling your eyes. But if I told you in a functional 25, 30-second thing, you'd understand that. And I think that's part of the challenge. You know, IT people know what IT people do, and financial people know what financial people do. But you have to have a story that resonates, that people can understand it.
That's right. Especially if you are networking with people that maybe aren't in your industry, but they or your role, but they have connections. You need to be able to convey what you do to them so that they can champion you to those people.
So this one is an interesting comment here. I've heard from a few career coaches that using a cover letter makes the applicant seem dated. Here's the thing about a career coach. Here's the thing about resume writers. We all speak from our personal experience on things. I don't know that there's one yes or no answer to everything.
Mhm.
There's so much information that's out there. And I think,
Yeah. Yeah, and so again, there are so many different opinions. I sort of base my own actions and guidance on um, the listenings of I read and follow lots of different people, and I err on the side of the majority, recognizing that there's some people that are going to disagree, but if the majority is in the camp that I'm following, then that best helps my client.
so Cindy, and this is one of the things we've all talked about on LinkedIn. You maybe find a job that has keywords in it or things you want to kind of populate your resume with, like the job spec. I mean, do you recommend that be in maybe at the top section where you have your skills? Do you think it
Mhm.
may make more sense to be within a specific job, or would you think you might do it in different areas?
So I actually, I when I'm really focusing on keywords, I try to make sure that they are more prevalent in LinkedIn because to me, LinkedIn is so algorithm optimized right now. And so I make sure that the number one, I make sure to use LinkedIn's tools to get the right keywords. And so I'll put them in the skills and endorsement section. I'll stick them in the headline. I'll add them to the job titles. On the resume, to me, it is most comfortable to weave in those keywords as part of the achievement that you're discussing. Um, so if you are in IT project management and your keyword, one of the keywords is software development lifecycle or SDLC, I might talk about how I led, I took a project from across the SDLC doing X, Y, and Z. So I'm weaving it into there. I will include a skills section sometimes for some people, again, depending on the story, but what I don't want is a big block of text that's this big. It's maybe 2 to 3 lines, very small, and I make sure that I list hard skills that I have researched as relevant to the role. LinkedIn's resume builder tool is a fabulous tool to help you identify the keywords. You literally go in, you pick the job title that you're looking for, and if you have premium, it shows even more. So get premium for 30 days just to use it. And it'll list like 15, 20 keywords that you need to make sure you include it. And then I make sure to weave them in across both my documents.
I think one thing to consider when you look for a resume writer or you look for someone to do your resume, it's not a 30-minute thing to do something like this. I mean, you can go online and find resume templates and things, but
Mm-hmm.
part of it is really understanding your audience and when you put things down and putting things that speak to you. I mean, there are so many resumes that are very similar out there, and I think that's part of the strategy, is taking what's out there and making it for you as opposed to just a boilerplate.
I do feel I might be, I know we're going to be talking about this, you and I, later on, but ChatGPT, if you say write a resume for blah, 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 you're going to get the keywords you need. It's pretty impressive. I wouldn't submit a ChatGPT resume, but especially if I was more junior, I might take it to and then sort of overlay my achievements with it. But then that makes sure that that way you're getting the achievements. And then you might be able to use a template that is easy to edit, that's not full of design. But you need to make sure it tells your own story because you're right. No two resumes should look alike.
Well, you bring up ChatGPT. You can pose a question on ChatGPT. You can ask, you can ask
Incredible.
It and it's
Yeah,
great, but it's only great as a starting point. You take that and
that's
then you
right.
want to make it,
It needs the human overlay with it. It's a tool, it's not the tool.
and I think the thing that most people don't realize is that, or I shouldn't say most people, because we've been going at this for a while and there's a lot of things going on. I think most people know by now to have different versions of resumes that are tweaked slightly differently. Um,
Hmm.
and I think part of it is really making sure you're putting the right resume in front of the right people.
100%. And making sure that it's easy to read. To me, the best, if the resume might have great, powerful stuff, but if it's all mushed together in 9-point font and big, really thin margins, it's too hard to read. Your eyes glaze over. So by making it readable, you can uh, keep your bullets and paragraphs 2 to 3 lines, add half of like 0.5 points on Microsoft Word spacing in between every bullet you write. Try not to have more than 5 or 6 bullets without a break. Those things make your resume easier to read. I always tell people run it save it as a PDF, open it on your phone. If you can scroll and sort of get the salient points quickly, you're on the right track. Otherwise, you need to go back to the drawing board because documents that are tough to read are sort of like when you sign up for something online and you've got to check off the service agreement and it's just a bunch of checks that makes your eyes want to bleed. It's the same phenomenon. We have a hard time digesting text when we're skimming, especially online. And resumes are read online for the most part at the beginning, especially. They might get printed out, but not till later on.
I think you bring up a good point in terms of viewability because I see a lot of it, and I think it may be different with different industries. Like a creative person might have a different resume than an IT person because they want to show something about them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I again, do you think that it's okay for someone who's in a creative area or a marketing area to have maybe color on the resume or a slightly different
Mm-hmm.
look and feel than another basic one?
Yeah, it's funny. Adrienne Tom, if you don't follow her, she has great advice. So I just commented on one of her posts. How you write for a finance person in Wall Street is very different than how you write for a techie person in Silicon Valley or an advertising person in New York. Um, the some industries are more formal than others. So if it's a more creative industry, then I might be more apt to use a crazier color. I might use an orange or a brighter blue or a green in when I'm writing my descriptors, like my headers and my name and things like that. If I'm doing Wall Street, it's going to be pretty conservative. So it's going to be navy and gray shading, just more muted stuff. But I do like to use a touch of color in everything I write. I don't like a sea of black and white, just because I feel like I don't care who the recruiter is. I think there's enough recruiters in certain industries that just appreciate something that's a little bit different than the thousands that they're getting. So if you're in a super conservative industry or a role, use navy. I don't think you're going to hurt anyone's feelings with it. And then if you do any shading to differentiate, use a very light gray.
What about pictures on a resume? Because people ask me that all the time.
Yeah. If you're looking for a job in the Middle East, they're fine. But in U.S. style resumes or global multinationals, it needs to be U.S. style without a picture. The caveat to that is the entertainment industry. Those it lends themselves to what you look like. It's interesting. I find it so interesting though that LinkedIn you're expected to have a picture, but then resumes you're not. But that's still the way it is. Companies don't want to open the doors to discrimination, and putting the picture on that just sort of opens them up to it. So it's a no-no.
So, Meryl had a question: the difference in tone between a resume and a LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, no, good question. So LinkedIn is conversational in nature, and the resume is more formal. Um, with LinkedIn, you should speak about yourself in the first person. You want, especially with the about section, you want the reader to have read it and felt like they've been in a room with you for 5 seconds. Um, that is the sort of the biggest difference in terms of the tone. In terms of the information that I include, again, the themes are the same, but there's details I might share in a resume that I'm not going to share in LinkedIn. So if, let's say, in your current company, you fixed a hot mess or the company got into hot water and you were part of, whatever it is, you're not going to shout that from the rooftops while you're still employed with the company. You don't want to throw anyone under the bus. So while you might share those details professionally in your resume, you're not going to include that in your LinkedIn. With a private company, you can't share certain revenue figures and growth figures and things like that publicly. And so I wouldn't share that kind of information on LinkedIn. You can allude to growth. You can sometimes maybe you can use percentages in lieu of revenue figures like dollar signs, but you don't want to get you or your company in trouble on LinkedIn.
What I see happening a lot on LinkedIn now is everyone is losing a job, is putting that open to work, talking about themselves, listing that what they need to do, which I think in some ways is really good because people are more open about it. But I think there's a little bit of a line you have to think about drawing. And it's about positioning yourself and what you can do in the future as opposed to what you did in the past. And I think job seekers are still figuring that out a little bit. What is okay to share, what is not okay to share, what's too much, what isn't enough.
It's hard, and you don't. A lot of people are hurt and angry, and rightly so. But you have to think hard about whether you want to burn any bridges, right? Boomerang employees is a phenomenon, and if the company was toxic and it was horrible, then you're probably never going to go back. But if there's any chance you want to speak respectfully about the people in the company, just like you would if you had a fight with someone. You're not probably going to badmouth them to a bunch of people. You're going to keep your thoughts to yourself, maybe share them with one or two people you trust, but you're not going to put it on blast.
So what types of things have changed in terms of resumes? I mean, or I'll take that back. Do you think resumes are always going to be with us in some way, or do you think that
yeah, they've been predicting the death of the resume since for a long, long time, as far as I can remember. I think they're going to continue to evolve. The resumes I wrote in 1995 are very different than the ones I wrote today. They wouldn't do as the ones I wrote that did really well back then wouldn't do well today. I see the importance of LinkedIn surpassing. To me, it's neck and neck, if not maybe surpass the resume, where that certainly wasn't the case. The biggest shifts in terms of how I write are because we are dealing with an increasingly skim-rushed audience, and because screens are getting smaller and people are comfortable opening up documents on those. 20 years ago, it was all print. 10 years ago, it was people reading on desktops. Now it's laptops and phones. I hope to God that we don't deal with resumes on iPhone or the iWatches, but small screen reading is different than big screen reading. So you have to take that into account when you're writing, because you're dealing with that dense text issue.
Just a matter
Luckily, everything you write for online prints out fine. It's just that the reverse isn't true.
Just to let everyone know, when this is over, if you go to this event, you're going to be able to watch the replay from the URL. That's usually the way it works. Okay. I find resumes are not going to go away, but you have to have different information on them now, because there's a different expectation. I think you also have to be very careful about what you put on there, for sure, and how you position it. I think it used to be, and I don't know if it's still true, that your LinkedIn profile has to match your resume in terms of chronologically. And I don't know if that's still truly the case or not, or if there's a little bit of wiggle room because of what's been going on.
I'm just trying to think of a case where the dates wouldn't match. I would, the stuff I write pretty much still aligns, but the resume is much more targeted to specific roles, where with LinkedIn, I'm writing them based on an amalgamation of roles. I ask people to send me a handful of postings of interest, and I write to that. But if you are then honing in on one specific company that maybe is, you can tell by reading the job posting that there's something that's really important to highlight that the other companies don't care as much about. I'll put that in the resume.
Is there a way that someone who's in one industry can find a job in another? I mean, in a very general way, because we talk a lot about the transitional skills and we talk about repositioning yourself. And I think the answer for the most part is yes, but I don't think it's as simple as just taking specific keywords.
No, yeah, it's harder. It is harder to make a shift than it is to sort of stay in your lane. That's the case with everything in life, right? The problem with so to me, just solely relying on applying online when you're making a shift is that you're not going to likely have those industry keywords that someone who's been in the industry will. But human beings are at the other end of these software. And if you can bypass software, applying online as that first point of entry, that doesn't mean you don't apply to it. It means that you are having conversations with decision makers. You're more apt to convince someone and get them to take a risk on you than if you do, applying online. Recruiters are look, there are recruiters that are looking to champion job seekers and take a risk, but they're paid by the company to find the best match. The chances are greater that the best match is going to be someone who's been in that industry. But people do make shifts. What you can do to affect that is, number one, you need to show that you need to highlight that you have maybe worked in other industries. Maybe you, even back when, pre-2008, you worked in other industries. Position yourself as industry neutral by highlighting those. Pull out lingo that is very industry specific and maybe align your language to that industry. It is also easier to land in an industry that is similar. So if you were in financial services, an ancillary industry might be healthcare because they both are highly regulated. So that's something that they have in common. If you sort of reference that you're experienced in highly regulated industries, it connects for the reader that it's not as big of a jump as, I don't know, financial services to acting or whatever it is. But micro pivots are sort of easier than big giant jumps.
So Sandra asked this question before, having phone numbers on resumes for job boards. Now, your phone number is going to be on your resume anyway when you apply. So I would ask Sandra if you can put back in the chat, are you talking about when they ask for your contact information when you fill it out? Because your phone number is always going to be there, whatever.
I know a lot of people have privacy concerns, so I always tell people go on Google Voice, get a free phone number, make that your job search phone number. You can create a Gmail just for your job search and make sure that is on all of your documents, and just make sure to check those phone numbers and those emails. But that allows you to slap contact information all over the place and not worry about giving anything away. And then you can forward the phone number to your regular phone.
So what about video resumes? Are video resumes a thing still? And how would you use them?
I think that we've seen enough anecdotal evidence where people love video resumes. You're sort of going outside the box with that. To me, it seems to have been more largely embraced in industries that are a little bit more creative. I don't think I'd rely at this point solely on a video resume, but I might have a regular traditional resume together with a video resume. Or maybe you send one, then you follow up with the other. It's definitely a way to stand out from the crowd while still sort of conforming to job search norms. But it feels to me like they're better received in some creative industries.
I wonder how much the impact of TikTok is having on this, because every once in a while
yeah, when TikTok was doing that video resume thing, it seemed like the companies that were partnering for that were, more innovative than others.
You also have to think of who's actually viewing the resumes. I think also nowadays, again, the departments, the mindset is different now. I mean, I would never be using an ATS to primarily apply. You may have to. I think it's all about getting in front of the right person, whoever it is.
That's right. And I think that video though can be very powerful, and you can use, LinkedIn gives you lots of opportunities to do that. There's the picture behind your, the video that you could put behind your headshot. Where is it in the job section where there's certain job types that you can actually give responses to interview questions.
Well, you can put the job skills. You can put the job skills within each job, and they can be coming from your skills. You can do the 30-second cover story, which is helpful.
Yeah, and the responses to the interviews, you can do audio only and video.
Yeah.
So there's ways to inject personality in there.
I also think engaging. Most people that are in job search are so afraid to engage. They're so afraid to start putting themselves out there outside of saying, "Hey, I'm looking for a job." And I actually said to Hannah Morgan, I said, that's almost like just basically saying, like, help me, I'm looking for a job. It's not a beneficial post. It's like another
Mhm.
job posting thing. And I think people really have to think about that because you're not going to set yourself apart from everyone else.
Right. No, you're right. And people, at the end of the day, it's still people speaking with people. Recruiters are people, hiring managers are people, job seekers are people. Um, you need to, it helps to stand out a little bit, but that doesn't mean you throw to me, it doesn't mean you throw all the old stuff out the window either. You can do both.
And part of all of this is when you are on a call like this or another thing, look at all the people that are in the conversation and connect with them if you're not connected.
Yeah.
I think that's such a big thing. I mean, one thing I always like to suggest, if you know ahead of time, whether you're going to an event, if you know the people are that are speaking, reach out to them first and connect with them in advance. Um, do anything different, for sure.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the comments.
Yeah, I mean, they're going crazy here. I think a lot of people are looking to do some sort of a pivot, and that's a word I actually don't like using anymore. So
Oh
much
yeah.
we're all pivoting, doing different things.
Yeah. What do you call it? Micro leap?
Micro leap is pretty good. I think the industry, we have these different buzzwords and things that we talk about. I think
Yeah.
it's really just more about the resume, and we haven't even talked about like a marketing brief or something that goes along with that. A resume is a starting point.
That's right. The best author that I can recommend on, she calls it career switching, is Dr. Dawn Graham. Her book is called Career Switchers, and I am such a fan of hers. I've heard her speak. She used to have a Sirius XM radio show, but she sort of walks you through how to position yourself on paper, in person, um, in all of your marketing collateral and your discussions with people when you are trying to make a change, and sort of the science and the human behavior behind it.
I don't think there's I don't think there's anything wrong with asking some types of questions on LinkedIn for support. I think that's kind of helpful, but I think what's even more helpful is to follow up and be inquisitive and try different things. I think a lot of us are in the mindset of just applying for a job. Here's the resume attached. That's it, um, and that's almost a black hole in and of itself.
My husband has, I use him as my guinea pig, and he's done several job searches, early ones where he didn't listen to me, and then he's got savvier and savvier. His last few jobs that he's landed have been, and he's an IT executive, um, talking, starts with like talking to three people. At the end of every conversation, he asks for names of three additional, and just continues conversations. And that's how he finds out about posted jobs, jobs that are going to be posted, jobs that were not posted. He's found out, he's landed that way and gotten lots of interviews.
So one thing that Dr. Scott Dell mentioned about is the idea of having like an e-portfolio link to be included in a resume. What I've done before is I've put down a website I've worked on as a project, and I go back and forth. Do I want people leaving my resume to go to that site? And would that same thing hold true there? I mean, I want people to stay on the page, but maybe it's okay if they go somewhere else. What do you think?
So to me, it depends on what you're targeting. If you're in the marketing space, you sort of need a portfolio, and so that shows that you get that. And I'm okay with including that link.
Mhm.
An accountant might not have an e-portfolio, uh, but they might have spoken at conferences and things like that. And so you can sort of list that thought leadership in the branding at the top. And you can use your LinkedIn profile as a sort of a complementary piece of career marketing collateral. And you can, in the featured section, you can include links to those speaking engagements, and things of that nature.
So I'm going to ask, Meryl wanted to know the name of the author and the book you recommended.
Yeah.
If you want to,
Her name
if
is,
you, I
can
was
we
going
put
to
it in the chat?
put it in the chat for sure, and I'll update it later on as well. I don't know if
I
you
don't
can.
think I can add one
Yeah,
from
do
here, but
me.
I can put it in the, I'll put it in the
Well,
private chat.
put it in the private chat, and I'll add it up later on because
Okay. Dr. Don Graham, career switchers.
yeah, and I'll add that as a follow-up comment for sure because I want to thank you, Virginia, very much for the conversation today. First of
My
two.
pleasure. You always have cutting and pasting right now. Your people, you guys always ask such great questions.
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the comments and the engagement that we have out here for all these calls. I mean, I've been, as someone who's been in transition many times myself, I try to bring people in who can answer questions I have because I think that's just as important for sure. So I'll let you get back to it in
Okay.
North Carolina and
Awesome.
have a great day. We'll chat on
Thank you.
Thursday.
That sounds great. Yep, we're audio only, no camera readiness on Thursday.
Absolutely. So you know what that means for us, don't you?
Talk to you later.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.